From Anchored in Faith Gospel Church in Oxford, Iowa, this is Anchored in Faith.
The spirit of Jezebel is, of course, in the world and in the church. And since judgment begins at the house of God, that means that we have to clean up ourselves as a church before we can minister to the world. Now, most churches have it backwards. They think that, all those people out there that aren't in church, that judgment's going to come there first, but really it's going to come on us first. And it's up to us to represent God in this world. That's what we're called to do. That's what Israel was called to do. And of course, we know she didn't do a very good job. Now, just to kind of review a little bit, remember that at this time, Israel was divided. There's two kingdoms. There's Israel in the north, which is where Elijah is ministering, and then there's Judah in the south. And there's 10 tribes in the north and 2 in the south. And the 10 tribes in the north are where Ahab and Jezebel were ruling. And of course, if you look at the history of what happened to both, they both went into captivity. But the northern tribes never came back. They went into captivity in Assyria, and they never returned to the land. Now, they're not lost. Some people say they're lost tribes. They're not lost, but they did not return. Judah returned out of Babylon. And Judah was on probably a scale of 1 to 10, a little less turned away from God than Israel was. Judah at least had a kind of a religious front. Of course, the temple was in Judah, and they had this, religious exterior, but they were corrupt also. They were worshiping idols. But Israel pretty much went away from God all the way, now, especially at the time of Jezebel, because she just brought Baal and Ashtaroth with her right into the land, and that was the official religion. You got to remember, back then, Israel was what's called a theocracy. In other words, the church and the state were united. Now, we don't have that in this country. We have a separation, and that's for purpose. The founders did that for purpose because they came from Europe, came from England and France and all these places where they'd been fighting religious wars for 200 years. And that was one thing that they were very adamant about, was that there was going to be no established church in the U.S. You could have your freedom, you could worship however you wanted, but there was not going to be, like in England, where the king or the queen, they're the head of the church there. If you didn't realize that, they are currently the Queen of England is the head of the English church. Now they have bishops and all that actually do this stuff, but she is the head of the church. And when she's gone, and Charles, who's her son, will be Charles III, he'll be the head of the church. That's English law. That's the way they're set up. And your tax money in England supports that church. Part of it, even if you don't go there. Even if you're a Catholic or if you're Muslim or something, your money you pay to the government, part of it funds the church. And there's other countries, in Scandinavia the same way. The Lutheran Church is supported by the state. We don't have that here. But in Israel, that's not so. Same in Judah. God had set it up so that his people would be ruled by him under his law. Now, originally, through his prophets. Of course, they wanted a king, and you know how that went. That didn't go very well either. They got a king, and things got worse. But God's plan was for Israel to be ruled by him through his priests and the prophets. And he was going to give them direction and revelation and guide them and all of that. That was the thing. But the church and the state were united. And so that's what we have in Israel, is that Ahab's the king. He marries Jezebel, who's an idol worshiper from Zidonia, and she brings her gods with her. Now that's what we teach our young people. We should teach everybody in the church. When you get married, the Bible says, do not be unequally yoked. Now, when you marry, you need to marry a Christian person that you know what they believe. If you marry some unsaved person and think you're going to get them saved, probably not going to happen. And they're going to bring their gods with them into that relationship. They have gods. Now, they may not be religious. Whatever they have that they worship is going to come to your house. And you're going to spend the rest of your time trying to, sort it out. So, you teach your children, if you're watching this on TV or whatever, you marry a Christian person because you're going to have a world of trouble. So we have Baal worship is established as the religion of Israel. And there's not even any sacrifices going on that I know of. They're not doing anything. She's killing off the prophets. She killed all the prophets of the Lord, except for 100. We find that they're hid away. But so that's where we're at. And Jezebel, the spirit is what's going on in the world today. We have a religious form around, even in the church. Most churches have a form. But if you try to step out and really worship God in most churches, you're going to be shown the door.
That's right. Amen.
And it's getting so bad that the government is going to show you something else. If you take your faith out in the public square, if you protest abortion or gay rights or same-sex marriage or any of this stuff, transgender, Bruce Jenner, I'm a guy, I'm not a guy, whatever. If you criticize that, you're going to be in big trouble. And so that's where we're at. That's a Jezebel spirit. This Jezebel spirit, is male and female. It's what's called androgynous. And if you know anything about Satanism and witchcraft, Satanists worship Satan as male and female. Male and female together in one body. So that's just a little aside, but that's what she was doing. And if you read, and I'm going to show you these, read about the issue between Yahweh and Baal was centered upon which god had control of the sky and the weather. Baal was worshipped as the god who rode on the clouds, who understood lightning, and who set his thunderbolt in the heavens. Yahweh proved his effectual capacity as rain giver, the true power of the heavens. Unfortunately, in people's minds, the question was not which god to serve, but which was more powerful. So Baal was it's called a fertility god. He's the one that made their crops grow, made the rain come, made their livestock reproduce, made humans reproduce. He was a fertility god, and they worshiped him in that way. And so he was worshipped in a certain way, and that's where all this sex worship comes from. He was worshipped with sexual rites, sexual ceremonies. And so was Ashtaroth, who was, we said before, not only his wife, but his mother. So they were worshipped in this way. You look at the worship of the Hebrews, there's none of that. You read the law of Moses, there is none of the stuff that the other nations would do in their worship. The priests were not allowed to drink wine before service, before they went and did their service. They were not to marry anybody outside the tribe of Levi. There was none of this sexual stuff that you see everywhere else in the ancient world. And so that makes the Hebrew religion distinct and different. Among other things, people say, well, like I said before, all these nations there, they're all pretty much the same. They weren't the same. They were not the same at all. Israel's worship was given by God in a very distinct way to make them separate from everybody else. God could have taken the Egyptian religion and just give it to Moses and take it and run, because he knew all about that. He was raised in it. He could have just, made a few changes and that's it. But he didn't. So Baal and Ashtaroth are both worshipped in this way, and they've replaced the worship of God in Israel. So, and again, this is what we've got going on. And, forget the world. The church of our day is going in the same direction. Now, we're here in little old Iowa, and we don't see a lot of the things that go on in some of these big mega church, big city churches. Some of the things that they do to get people in the door. And a lot of it is just do your thing. If you want to live with somebody, if you want to live with somebody of the same sex, if you want to, drink and do drugs on your, as long as you don't bring it in the church, we're not going to say anything. These big ministries are just clamming up. Joel Osteen, big, well-known ministry, said a month or two ago, he was interviewed, he said, it's not my business to preach against sin. It's my business to make people feel good and to help them maximize their potential and live their best life and all of that. He doesn't preach against sin. You can't find too many that preach against sin or that will say, come out of your cult, come out of your false religion, come out of this or that, and find a church that, is serving God. We will. We'll tell you that. If you're out there, if you're in the Watchtower, or if you're in the Mormons or something, you need to get out and find a church where the true God is worshiped. And you'll find there's a difference. But most of them won't. It's that cash flow. Because they got big budgets, and they can't make the budgets if they make people mad. So, that's why God's not using the big churches. I don't think. He's using the little ones like us. He's using the ones that are faithful, that are willing to call sin, sin, unrighteousness, unrighteousness, and tell people they got to live right. If they're trying to find what God's telling them, they'll say, gee, maybe I better change my dress, or maybe I better, get rid of my touchdown Jesus, or, it's what you're, some of this stuff isn't wrong. I watch football games, but I don't have to have every stat and every game and, NFL Sunday and 27 games and stuff like that. You're in bondage if you're doing that stuff, And so, you'll go a long way in this world to find a church that will teach separation from the world in all ways, not just your dress code. How about your business ethics if you're in business? How about the way you go out in the world and buy and sell? You know, Christians can get a pretty ugly reputation, and they have. They can be pretty mean out there, and I know you get ripped off. People rip you off. People make you mad, you know, but it's how we respond to that. Jesus said, the word says, you know, suffer yourself to be defrauded. If you got cheated on something, you know, you're just going to have to just keep going. It happens. You know, people let you down. People say one thing and do another in the church, out of the church. And so we have to, as best we can, we have to lift up the Lord. And that's what Elijah was doing. Elijah was an in-your-face guy. I mean, he said, I'm the only, of course, he was kind of bragging a little bit. He thought he was the only prophet of God. He wasn't. God showed him that. But he was the only one on the scene. He was the only one willing to take on the false prophets. Nobody else did. Everybody else was afraid. And he took them on. And so that's the battle that's going on, is that the true church has always been a remnant. It's always been a small remnant. It wasn't Israel. You know, Israel went into captivity. Israel never came back. Judah went to Babylon for 70 years, and you know most of them stayed in Babylon when they let them come back, when the Persians conquered Babylon and they let them come back. Most of the Jews stayed in Babylon because they liked it. It was comfortable. You know, they settled down. You know, they didn't go back. Probably 20% went back, I'm guessing. And the other 80% stayed in Babylon. And so that tells you something, that God separates these groups out. He's got a true church, but he's got to separate it from the world. Now, what did Jesus say? The tares and the wheat. Tares and wheat look just the same when they're growing. But tares are just weeds. Wheat's wheat. You got to separate them. And that's what God is doing. He's separating them. And so when Elijah takes on the priests of Baal and Ashtoreth, or Baal actually, he's standing alone. Sometimes we're going to have to stand alone. A lot of times we're going to have to stand alone. You'd be the only one in your school. You'd be the only one in your work. You know how it is. You know how people will talk and, you know, make fun, or whatever they're going to do. But you know what? I've had this experience. Tana's had it. Maybe you have too. People laugh at you, but you know what? When they get in trouble, they'll come to you. And I've had them do it. Will you pray for me? I can see that you're really with God. Will you pray for me? I have this situation. You know, and you better, yeah, I'll pray for you. You don't have to tell me what it is. I'll pray for you. If you want to tell me, that's fine. If not, they'll do that. They know that you've been with Jesus. They know that you're true. People can tell because it's that spiritual warfare. Your spirit, what's in you, versus the spirits that are in them. And they can tell that there's something there if you're really living for God. And I've had that experience, and I know Tana has, and maybe you've had it too, where people have come to you in private, of course, they don't going to do it when their buddies are around, and they'll say, will you pray for me? And, or you know, what maybe, well, what's the Bible say about this? Am I doing something wrong here? Or you seem to know, be close to God. Well, maybe, but I'm close to God, but He's the one. It's not me. See, it's not my righteousness. People just call Christians self-righteous, but it's the sinners that are self-righteous because they're trusting in their own righteousness. We're only trusting in God's righteousness. We're not making this up. We're not making up some code to live by. They're the ones doing that because they don't have God. God will tell you how to live. And so Elijah was standing alone. Maybe you'll stand alone, and more, you're going to be standing by yourself. This is the battle that's going on in the end times. And we're in the end times. And Elijah was in an end time situation for him because he was taken up into heaven. And him going up into heaven in the whirlwind is a type of the church being taken out of the world. And so when we're gone, what's going to happen to the world? They won't have that witness anymore. One day everybody here is going. And then who's going to minister in Oxford? Who? Catholics? Methodists? You know the town. I don't. Is there some other group here? Or Iowa City? Or Cedar Rapids? Or wherever? When everybody's gone? Who's going to be there to point people to God? We'll be gone. We'll be gone. And they'll know we're gone. And they'll say, woe is me. Woe is me. I should have listened. I should have listened to that old Holy Joe that I worked with or went to school with or, lived next to me or something. And so Elijah's going to be taken away. Now Elisha's going to come along and he's going to minister for a while. But once they're gone, Israel's gone. And so they go into captivity and never return. Judah has the same thing. They go into captivity, some of them return, and most of them stay. So what is that telling us? That the church that we see is not the church that's going in the rapture. Now, you can argue about, is anybody going to be saved during tribulation? I don't know. Brother John didn't believe that. I don't think he did he? He believed if you didn't go, nobody was going to get saved during the tribulation? Did he? But, he didn't. Once the true church is gone, then things are really going to get ugly because there will be nothing to prevent the judgment. I don't think God's going to pour out his wrath on his church. I think we'll have hard times, have tough times, persecution, whatever. But I don't think the full judgment's going to fall on us because we are being faithful. And that's meant for the world. But once we're gone, then the witness of the Spirit is gone. The Holy Ghost is gone. Who's going to read the Bible to these people? The Bibles will be burnt. You'll have to hide one in the root cellar or something underground to have a Bible. They'll collect them and burn them. They may do that while we're here. Who knows? It's getting very difficult to be a Christian. Not very difficult to be other religions, though. Other religions are getting a pass. Other religions are getting everything they want. Prayer time in the schools. Christians, you can't pray. Don't bring that Bible to school. But the Muslim students, we don't want to be racist. We don't want to be bigots. We don't want to be haters, And so they're getting a pass. More and more of what Christians do and stand for is being criminalized. Pushed in the corner, criminalized, and the whole weight of the government is coming against them. Now, that's been going on for a while. It's not just the current people in power at all. It's been going on for quite a while. But it's getting worse. And as the Muslims rise in the world, and they're making a lot of converts. Islam, I mean, we have people that are going on, kids, teenagers, barely old enough to shave, are going on the internet and signing up to fight in some terror group. And they're stealing a credit card and buying a plane ticket and going and signing up to fight for something that they don't really understand, because once they get there, especially the women, the girls, they find out pretty quick where their place is. And again, I've said this before, you just remember, ladies, if you're out there watching this, under Islamic law, every woman and girl has to be under the headship of a man. That's Islamic law. You got your husband, your father, your brother, uncle, grandfather, somebody. Everybody is under the headship of some man. And he tells you where to go, what to do, how to dress, and all of that. He will tell you, and if you dishonor that, you'll be in trouble. So, if you think it's such a great deal, well, okay, but I wouldn't, as a woman, I wouldn't think it'd be too cool to live like that when you're living in America, which is relatively free. So, again, we are in the battle. We're Elijah. We are Elijah. We're to have the spirit of Elijah. We sing about it. We sing about the spirit of Elijah. That's us. We're the ones going to have to stand up and take on the priests of the false god and the priests of Jezebel and the religion of Jezebel, which is just rampant in the church. And it's got to start in the church. Start in the church first, and once we get kicked out of the church, then we'll just regroup in places like this and you have to keep going, because Elijah ended up in a cave. Where was he? He was in a cave in the wilderness. And, of course, he was boo-hooing to God about, oh, they're trying to kill me. And I don't, he kind of really fell. I don't know why, but he was up here after he killed all the prophets. And then short time later, he's boo-hooing to God about they're trying to get me. Well, she was. And so, and we do that too. We have a victory, and we're hopping and dancing and cheering and, praising God, and it isn't long and we're back in the dumps. So I hate to say it that way, but that happens to us. That happens to us. We forget what God has done. We forget because we see some new thing and we say, "Oh no, this is bigger than this is more than the last time." Well, guess what? It's always going to be more because God wants you to grow. That's how you grow.
Full sermons are available anytime at www.anchoredinfaith.org. Contact us by calling 319-828-4815 or write us at Anchored in Faith, P.O. Box 204, Oxford, Iowa 52322, or email us at tv@anchoredinfaith.org. This has been a copyrighted presentation of Anchored in Faith Gospel Church, Oxford, Iowa.